Let's talk about the Equalizer. The Equalizer. Sorry, my partner got the name wrong and I've been teasing her ever since, and it's just kind of stuck. I know English isn't her first language, but there is no way I can leave a gift like that alone. So, the Equalizer. No, not that one. This one.
I'm super bad. It's McCall.
My good sense and decency. No, not that one. Definitely not that one. Let's rewind. The original Equalizer was bloody brilliant, and Edward Woodward really brought the character to life and gave it that no nonsense, no forgiveness, no exceptions, burn in hell you evil bastards feel. But jump forward 30 years and Robert McCall finally graces our screens once again, albeit a cinema screen. And while Denzel Washington wouldn't have been my first choice for the role, he was certainly a good one, and continued Edward Woodward's legacy in a graceful and faithfully adapted way. Did I say graceful? I meant brutal. And that is no bad thing. The Equalizer films are brutal, and this third movie is no exception. Robert McCall has seen everything, and he shies away from nothing. If he has to go to Sicily and kill a vineyard full of cybercriminal bad guys with whatever stabby pointy implements he can find, then he will, and does. And that was just for stealing one man's pension. And this is where this movie begins. Incidentally, if only governments and pension providers had a guy like Robert McCall haunting their nightmares, perhaps the pension system would be a lot safer and more reliable. After McCall is finished seeing how many pension-stealing cybercriminals he can fit in a bucket, he is shot in the back by the young son of the main bad guy. He sees the kid off, then seeing how injured he is, he tries to kill himself. But he finds he's run out of bullets, necessitating his escape back to mainland Italy, where he is found unconscious in his car by a local policeman. The policeman takes him to a tiny, stunningly beautiful coastal town to see the local doctor named Enzo. Enzo is your classic small-town doctor. He delivered most of the rest of the inhabitants with his own bare hands, and he's a bastion of the community. He takes McCall in, treats his wound, and gives him a place to stay, and is in no rush for him to leave. He asks McCall if he's a good man, and McCall says he doesn't know. Which is an understandable response considering the things he does to people who have wronged others. But Enzo realizes that only a good man would suffer from the moral quandary of whether he is truly good or not, and so realizes that McCall is worthy of his time, effort, and hospitality. As he recovers and regains his strength, McCall comes to love the town and its people. He finds solace and companionship, and possibly love, though it's never confirmed or denied whether anything may happen in that department, but hey, I'm rooting for him. The longer McCall is there, the more he wants to stay. And then one day, a motorcycle gang turns up and shakes down the local fishmongers, causing McCall to realise that even here, in the most idyllic place imaginable, there are still people that want to cause pain and suffering, and to line their own pockets in the process. And this is where the story really begins. McCall realises that this is where he is supposed to be. It isn't chance that an avenging angel turned up on the shores of a paradise on the brink of despair. He has the skills and the determination to do what the townspeople can't, and he wouldn't want them to sully their hands and leave them wondering if they're good or bad people for doing what needs to be done. So McCall takes it upon himself to fix the problem, and after giving the bad guys a chance to leave the people alone, he takes things into his own hands and wreaks bloody, vicious revenge on main bad guy Vincent and all his men. This movie makes it very clear that Denzel Washington's version of Robert McCall is a high-functioning sociopath. His actions when he kills the bad guys are very questionable, and leave you wondering just what is he thinking as he sits there watching people slowly die, waiting for them to take their final breath. My partner just couldn't help jumping at almost every vicious scene in the movie, even the scenes that weren't vicious, because she was already prepped, she was jumping all over the place. At one point near the end, there's a scene where the main bad guy Vincent is under attack at his home by McCall, and he is walking around his house and finding his men dead, and on one occasion he touches one of the dead men and his head falls off and rolls away. And it is at this point that you realise that good and bad are a very fine line, and that this is the reason why McCall is wondering if he is a good or a bad man, because there was no need to cut that guy's head off and then pose him as though he was just sitting against a wall. He had no idea if Vincent was going to touch that guy and knock the head off. Yes, he was deliberately trying to scare Vincent, but it takes a special kind of mental illness to do something so macabre with no reason to expect anyone will ever find out that you did it. He did it for his own reasons because in his mind, cutting off that guy's head, then posing him and balancing it back on his shoulders was not an unreasonable or sick thing to do. And this is what makes him so good at what he does. He knows the difference between right and wrong, which means that he can judge who is good and who is bad. But he lacks the mental mechanisms that make most of us shy away from viciously and brutally torturing a person who has done us and our own families no harm. He is capable in cold blood of the most horrific, violent actions because he doesn't feel things the way that normal people do. If his upbringing had been different, he could just as easily have been a remorseless serial killer roving the highways, a bit like Rutger Hauer was in The Hitcher, although the fact that Rutger Hauer wanted to be stopped indicates that he understood how evil he was. The original Robert McCall, played by Edward Woodward, wasn't a sociopath. He understood the evil he had wrought in his previous life. There is a scene where he tells an old colleague that he hasn't slept in years because of the things he's done. But it is those experiences that made him able to do what he does now. Perhaps it's the same with Denzel's version, but the unfeeling persona, the lack of obvious emotion, makes me think otherwise. Whatever the answer, the film is fantastic. It really is a great way to bookend this very interesting reincarnation of a cool character that was all but forgotten since Edward Woodward died. I would quite happily pop back to the cinema and watch this again. I wasn't expecting much from the movies this year, but between The Sound of Freedom, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, and The Equalizer 3, I guess it hasn't been all bad. I can definitely recommend this movie. It may cover old ground, and it may not add anything new to the world, but it does entertain, and it does remind us all that some things are worth protecting. This has been Movies Suck, thinking that perhaps Hollywood isn't all bad.
I'm super bad. It's McCall.
Nope, forget I said that.
Burn it all.
Signing out. Leave a like, share, subscribe, and I will catch you guys on the flip side.